What the latest is, we signed contracted to do a rematch, and that's what it is right now.
Do you know when it's going to be, when we can
I
hear?
don't got no date right now, but I know that's the next fight that Terence Crawford.
How long do you think it will be before we might have something?
I don't know. It's still up in the air, given
undisputed male boxing, in any division, in a 4-belt era, and I honor, that. And if he was to come to me or activate his,
I mean, it could happen. I mean, why not? If Crawford want to challenge himself to be great, let him try to be great. So what I'm saying, I'm with it. So I'll be going for Bud. If he fight Canelo, I'll be going for him.
The sport is in turmoil once again. Just when it seemed like Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. had gone their separate ways, talks for a rematch are suddenly back on the table as of April 2025. This time, it's not just rumors. Negotiations are actively happening behind the scenes, with both fighters discussing the possibility. Tensions are escalating quickly, as Crawford has already challenged Spence's position in boxing.
I wanted to see that immediately after that fight, but now time has kind of run its course. I don't want to see Errol. I just don't want to see Errol. I believe Errol Spence is a generational talent, great fighter.
Crawford and Spence have never been ones to hold back, and as talks for a rematch turn into reality, their rivalry is getting louder. They're taking shots at each other in interviews, on social media, and even during a heated live exchange. Spence, who has been out of the ring since his brutal loss to Crawford in 2023, is more fired up than ever. He's pushing hard for the rematch, claiming that the first fight didn't tell the full story, that he was drained at 147 lbs, and that the weight cut took everything out of him. Crawford, however, is reminding everyone of what happened the last time they stepped in the ring, how he knocked Spence down 3 times and how the fight wasn't even close. But Spence refuses to accept that narrative. He's still convinced that at 154 lbs, everything will
But
change.
you gonna knock my first? Because I want to personally. We talking about what we want to see. I want. Why? Because I know what it's gonna look like. The
No,
same
you
as
don't.
Last time.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do.
Errol Spence wasn't the same.
What was wrong with him?
He looked slow. He looked he
Why?
looked sluggish.
Why?
I can't tell you. I wasn't in
At
camp.
the division, he dominated for his entire career. All of a sudden, when it came time for this fight, he looked different. Why?
I wasn't in camp with him. I can't tell you. I don't know if his body finally broke down from being at 140,
The entire
47.
rematch situation has been a roller coaster since the moment Spence exercised the rematch clause after their first fight, where Crawford destroyed him in July 2023. Spence wasted no time triggering the clause, determined to get another shot. But the contract was clear. Unless either fighter submitted written notice stating they couldn't make 147 lbs, the rematch would take place at welterweight again. Spence never officially filed that notice, yet he and his team kept insisting the fight should happen at 154. Crawford wasn't having it. He had no reason to give Spence an advantage after beating him so decisively. That's where the standoff began.
But weight can be used as an excuse and sort of say, I don't feel like it. Like, I'll go up for this guy, but not another guy. So, that's sort of the spirit. The language is very, more precise and very definitive. But the concept is, out of fairness, is,
let's be made, but weight couldn't be used as an excuse to pick and choose opponents. The language in the contract was more precise and definitive, but the core principle was fairness. Fighters couldn't be selective. Then, Spence's health issues slowed everything down. He underwent eye surgery, faced a long recovery, and raised doubts about whether he could ever return to form. While Spence dealt with all that, Crawford moved on, winning another title at 154 by defeating Israel Madrimov and shutting down any talk of a rematch. When reporters asked him about it, he barely acknowledged the possibility. Nah, he said, dismissing it completely. At that moment, it seemed like the rivalry was over.
I don't want your reaction. Errol Spence rematch on the table still.
No.
All right, let's work around there.
When asked about an Errol Spence rematch, Crawford initially dismissed it outright, saying, "No, all right, we're going to wrap it." But now, things are shifting fast. Crawford is no longer shutting the door completely, while Spence is ramping up the pressure, calling him out at every opportunity. Many fans believe Spence deserves another shot, arguing that the weight cut truly affected him and that the version of Spence in the ring that night wasn't the real one. Others see that as an excuse, insisting he was simply exposed and that a rematch would play out the same way, regardless of the weight class.
Believe that the fight would have went that way regardless, because stylistically, the fundamentals on that level, Crawford had just outclasses Errol Spence in every single category.
Spence, however, is making this personal. He is openly accusing Crawford of ducking him, trying to walk away from the contract, and acting like the fight never existed just because he had the upper hand the first time. But Crawford never won. To let someone dictate the narrative is firing right back. He's reminding Spence that he had his chance, got dominated, and didn't even look like he belonged in the ring.
47, but I'm sure he's probably gonna push the weight up. But there's not gonna be no change in the decision. The performance still is gonna be the same. Might be even a little bit better. So he might want to watch out before he activates the rematch clause.
In real time, both fighters are making it clear they're ready to go to war again. Despite everything, Spence remains confident, insisting that Crawford has never faced him at full strength, that he wasn't himself in their first fight, and that he's going to prove everyone wrong. Crawford, on the other hand, is almost laughing at the idea that anything will be different. To him, Spence has always been overrated, his style too predictable, and if they stepped into the ring again, he believes he'd beat him even faster, the second time. The trash talk is escalating by the day, and with both men finally admitting that negotiations are happening, this fight is looking more real than ever.
Let's go! As you can see, man, breaking news. Errol Spence activated that rematch clause to fight Terence again, right? Let's be honest, we all saw the fight. Crawford beat boogers out there, boy.
However, the trash talk is already making waves in the sport. Terence Crawford and Shakur Stevenson have always been close, their bond built on years of respect, mentorship, and shared ambitions. But now, their views on Errol Spence Jr.'s legacy are putting them in opposite corners. Crawford, never one to sugarcoat his opinions, has sparked controversy by outright dismissing Spence's Hall of Fame credentials. Meanwhile, Stevenson, one of boxing's brightest young champions, isn't having it. Their disagreement has ignited heated debates among fans, analysts, and even fellow fighters, with opinions clashing over what truly defines a Hall of Fame.
Good win. I'm still a fan. I hope he do well. But like, once it got to the point where I moved up in weight and I'm in the same weight as Spence, it's just like, oh man, you ain't fighting nobody. You this, you that, you this, you that. So now they trying to blemish my accomplishment just to boost him up. I'm like, dude, you're not gonna do that, because I can retire right now and be in the Hall of Fame. He could. Everything that I've accomplished, he's still trying to accomplish. I don't want to sound like I'm hating on him. I honestly don't know if he make it to the Hall of Fame with the accolades that he did.
Crawford set this controversy in motion during an appearance on the Pound for Pound podcast with Kamaru Usman and Henry Cejudo. He didn't hesitate when the topic of Spence's legacy came up. In his view, Spence doesn't make the cut. His reasoning? Spence only competed in one division. While Crawford acknowledged Spence's accomplishments, unifying 3 welterweight titles and defeating top-tier opponents like Sean Porter, Danny Garcia, and Yordenis Ugas, he was firm in his belief that it wasn't enough. To him, a Hall of Famer is someone who conquers multiple weight classes, builds an undeniable resume, and proves their greatness beyond a single division.
One of the best wins on your resume. Start to make people look at your resume with a question mark. Terence Bud Crawford's
statement sent shockwaves through the boxing community. He didn't just critique Spence's career, he effectively shut down any discussion of Spence's place in boxing history. That's why the backlash has been swift, with fans and experts calling him out for downplaying Spence's achievements. Some see it as unnecessary disrespect, while others believe Crawford is simply being honest. However, the most surprising pushback didn't come from analysts or former fighters. It came from Shakur Stevenson, one of Crawford's closest friends. When asked about Crawford's comments during an interview with Best Women's Boxing show, Stevenson was quick to disagree. "I feel as though Errol had a great career," he said, standing firm in his stance. "If it wasn't for Bud, he would have been undisputed. He went and got every belt one by one by one. I think he's a Hall of Famer." His words cut through Crawford's narrative, offering a different perspective, one that recognized Spence's dominance before their fight, and what could have been if Crawford hadn't been in his way.
Terence went on Pound for Pound podcast, and he said that Errol Spence will not be a Hall of Famer. Can you just give me your thoughts on that? Do you disagree? Why do you disagree?
I feel as though Errol had a great career. If it wasn't for Bud, he would have been undisputed. So he went and got every belt one by one by one. I think he's a Hall of Famer.
Stevenson's stance highlights an ongoing debate in boxing's Hall of Fame discussions. Does greatness depend on accomplishments across multiple divisions, or can a fighter cement their legacy by dominating a single weight class? Stevenson firmly believes Spence's reign at 147 was enough, but Crawford isn't budging. To him, being a unified champion in one division, even with Spence's level of success, isn't enough for boxing immortality.
I think Errol's run was long enough, no Diddy, to automatically put him in the Hall of Fame. He was a very good fighter. If there was a Hall of Very Good, he would be going into that. But Hall of Fame, no. If you were in charge of writing the Hall of Fame speech for Errol Spence, and I was in charge of writing a Hall of Fame speech for Bud Crawford, my Hall of Fame speech, listing my credentials, listing my accolades for Bud Crawford, would sound a lot better than your speech for Errol Spence, bro. Yeah, I don't think unifying and holding 3 titles automatically puts you in the Hall of Fame.
The tension between Crawford and Stevenson may not be a full-blown rift, but it's certainly making waves. Their friendship has always been built on mutual respect, but this is one of the rare times they've publicly disagreed on something major. Stevenson isn't just another fighter offering his opinion. He's someone who has spent years learning from Crawford, training with him, and looking up to him. For him to challenge Crawford's stance so directly speaks volumes. It also raises questions about how their relationship might be affected in the long run.